On Easter Sunday, President Trump fired off a profanity-laced post on his Truth Social threatening Iran, warning of more destruction if Tehran did not reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and he closed it with the line, quote, "Praise be to Allah." By Monday, he was defending the tone of that post at the White House, saying that he used that language to make his point. Now, this all comes as the current Iran war has moved into a more dangerous phase, with President Trump publicly setting a Tuesday deadline for threatening broader strikes on Iranian infrastructure. Now, I want to be crystal clear here because nuance has become almost a felony in America, right? I mean, this is not an anti-Trump monologue, okay? I am not arguing that Kamala Harris would have been a better president. I am not arguing that Joe Biden would be preferable to Trump or that he was better in his term. I am not arguing that conservatives should suddenly become CNN interns, all right? But I am saying what some of us warned back in 2024, that a second President Trump presidential term was not going to be a rerun of the first one. Not just because Trump had changed, but because America has changed. We're a nation that continues to shake its fist at God, and then we act surprised when our leadership gets weird, arrogant, impulsive, and detached. And I said on a prior episode of Culture Crossroads, right before the 2024 election, I said that America very well may be a nation under judgment, under divine judgment, not divine blessing, divine judgment. Because the Bible does not teach that a nation can celebrate child sacrifice and sexual chaos, greed, lies, state worship, technological idolatry, and open contempt for God, and then just moonwalk into blessing like nothing is happening. Romans 1 says that one of God's judgments is giving a people over to whatever it is they want. Now, sometimes judgment looks like fire from heaven, and sometimes judgment looks like a people getting handed over to the consequences of what they insisted that they wanted. Psalm 33:12 said, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord." America has spent years trying to replace that with "Blessed is the nation whose God is their government." In 2 Samuel 24, King David chose to fall into the hands of the Lord rather than the hands of men when presented with a choice of which judgment, which discipline he would rather have. David felt that the mercy of God would be better than the mercy of the enemies. And I think this was always the strongest Christian case for voting for President Trump in 2024. Again, in my view, not that he was a messiah, not that he was morally clean or without flaw, not that Trump was some kind of orange Cyrus with a halo. But the case was that if judgment was coming either way, then the judgment would be better if it leave our nation more opportunity, more room for repentance, more room for worship, more room to speak like this, more room to preserve order, and less room for the open civilizational demolition that Kamala Harris and the Democrats represent. But that argument only works if conservatives, and particularly Christians, remember that the preferred is not the perfect. And that's where I think the right keeps face-planting, particularly the GOP and their messaging. Because if Joe Biden had posted that exact same Easter message that you see next to me here on the screen, if Joe Biden had threatened to make Iran a living hell and then signing off with "Praise be to Allah," conservative media would have detonated like a strip mall, okay? Fireworks galore. There would be wall-to-wall coverage about the mental fitness, about Biden's hostility to Christians, about his disrespect for Easter, his tone-deaf war rhetoric, and presidential unseriousness. And some of that criticism, all of it probably, absolutely would be fair. So why then does it suddenly become sacred and untouchable genius because it was done by President Trump? This is the racket, okay? We're told that to support the man, in order to be a true conservative and a Trump supporter or whatever else you want to call it, that we have to support every impulse, every troll, every peacocking post, and every rake that he steps on. But that's not conservatism. That's not constitutionalism. That's not citizenship. That's not patriotism. That is emotional hostage taking dressed up in campaign merchandise. A supporter is not a court eunuch. You can support taking out Iran as a strategic threat, as I do, and still reject junior high social media theatrics on Easter. You can want America to win and still say, Mr. President, this is beneath the office. This is beneath we the people. You can support military action and still say Congress should have done its job and declared war. The Constitution gives Congress the power to declare war under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11. This is not a suggestion. This is not a vintage decoration. That's an actual constitutional order. And this matters, I say again, and you can go back to my videos about this, but because when Congress refuses responsibility and presidents act first and explain later, the people are the ones, we the people are the ones left holding the invoice, the inflation report, and too often the body bags. Speaking of which, we need to drop the fairy tale that everything is humming along beautifully right now for ordinary Americans. The latest Bureau of Labor Statistics data show consumer prices up 2.4% year over year in February 2026. Food was up 3.1%, and food away from home was up 3.9%. So no, this does not feel like 2019 to a family standing in a grocery aisle doing magical math with their debit card and their checkbook. Now, back to Iran. After Iran rejected the U.S.-backed ceasefire framework, which was delivered over the Easter weekend, the war moved from ugly rhetoric to the kind of action that does land hardest on civilians. Reuters reported that President Trump widened the threat to Iran's civilian infrastructure, including power plants and bridges, and warned that broader strikes could follow if Tehran did not comply. Now, this is where the liberation argument might wobble a little bit. I mean, let's be honest. Let's look at this objectively. Because when bridges get blown apart and power systems go dark, it's not like the regime suddenly starts missing meals. It's not like the Iranian overlords are walking to work or sitting in the dark with their frightening children. No. That's the Iranian people. Now, I believe probably many of the Iranian people may want their government overthrown as much as we would like to overthrow them. But the fact is, the government will always find a bunker. They'll have a backup generator. They'll have a propaganda line. They'll have food supplies. It's the average citizen that gets the blackout. It's the average citizen that gets the wrecked road, the empty shelf, sometimes the funeral. So if we're going to say that we want to liberate the Iranian people, we should also be honest enough to admit that blowing up the basic infrastructure they depend on is kind of a brutal way to introduce ourselves, whether or not it might be strategically necessary. And I will admit, as we all should, we don't have every piece of information going on. We have what we can see. Now, that is part of why this moment feels so strange, I think, for conservatives and Christians. And the moment, again, I've left the Trump's post on the screen the whole time. I realize it has some language. But you see, first-term Donald Trump felt to many Americans like momentum. We had stronger consumer confidence. We had fewer foreign policy nightmares. Lower everyday stress, less sense that the country was being run by faculty lounge activists and compliance bots. But this moment feels different. The war is expanding. Costs are still grinding people down. The regime class is still obsessed with AI and surveillance and data centers and technocratic control, often steamrolling the objections of regular people in the process. We have brought you those stories as well. So when the president lobs an Easter morning grenade onto social media, I don't think people are wrong to ask whether this administration is governing or just freestyling. Now, I'm not saying that they don't have plans or global strategic plans, but certainly President Trump's messaging seems to be more impulsive than specific. And let me say something else I think that needs to be said, particularly on the Christian side. Easter is the day that we celebrate when Christ conquered sin and death through his resurrection. It's not the day for a commander-in-chief to sound like a drunk guy live posting from a casino buffet line. Okay? Strength is not the issue. Resolve is not the issue. The issue is whether we still know the difference between courage and performance, between leadership and provocation, between righteous force and vanity theater. Because some on the right and in conservative media have confused tough with reckless, authentic with undisciplined, and funny or entertaining with fit to govern. All right, let's be honest. Now, that confusion puts many people in danger. And again, I'm not saying Iran is innocent. They are not. I am not saying America should do nothing I'm actually for the intervention. I've been over this before. You can check my past videos and see that. But I'm saying that objective loyalty to truth is more American than blind loyalty to any politician. The founders did not build a republic so that citizens would become PR interns for executive branch mood swings. And Christians should know better. We don't measure truth by whether it was our side that said it. And we don't excuse sin because the polling might be favorable. We don't call foolishness wisdom just because it came wrapped in a red tie and a campaign slogan. Now, the book of Proverbs doesn't suddenly disappear because the guy in question also appointed judges that you might have liked at the time. So I'm going to repeat what I said a couple of years ago. I don't believe America is under God's blessing right now. We may still have God's protection, we do, but I don't think we're under God's blessing in the biblical sense. I believe we're under divine judgment, and I believe we're seeing that. That is why our government continues to do so many things that we didn't ask or vote for the government to do. That is why we are gaslit by every major politician you can think of, and the ones who are willing to stand up for the truth are sidelined and railroaded and spit out. You see, a nation that slaughters unborn children, that mutilates truth, that mocks marriage, that commercializes lust, that exalts the self and tries to replace God with biotech fantasies and transhumanist swagger should not flatter itself with revival-sounding language while they're living like the old days of Babylon. Judgment does not always arrive wearing black robes and carrying a scythe with a skeleton face. Sometimes it shows up as people losing the ability to think clearly, or speak honestly, or be willing to call their own side to account. That's where the danger is. Because once a movement can no longer say, that was wrong, it is no longer a movement. It's a personality cult with merch and podcasts and donor lists. All right? And once Christians can no longer say, hey, this was unworthy of Easter, this was unworthy of the office and unworthy of the moment, then we're no longer bringing salt and light to a darkened world. In fact, we are just another cheering section sitting in the dark. And this is true of all presidents, okay? But when President Trump steps on a rake, it's we the people that get hit in the face. And if we're not willing to say that out loud, we're not willing to call it to account, we're not willing to be honest about it, then we're not defending our country. We're helping to disable the brakes of what, if you ask me, and I think a growing sentiment of people, looks more like a controlled demolition, a managed national decline than it does a return to America's golden age. America used to be a nation of aspiration. And not too often, really, we're like a nation of access. Who has access? Who gets access? Who keeps access? Who flatters power enough to stay near it? But access is not a governing philosophy. Access does not heal a nation. Access won't lower prices, and it will not restore constitutional order. Access doesn't revive churches, it doesn't strengthen families, or teach people to fear God. Repentance does that. Truth does that. Courage does that. So no, this is not anti-Trump. It's anti-idolatry. It's anti-cowardice, and it's anti-lie. We need to support what is right and oppose what is wrong. This is not controversial. We need to tell the truth, even if our own side hates the sound of it, because that's not betrayal, that's actual citizenship. And for Christians, that's obedience. Because the moment that you have to deny what your own eyes can see in order to prove that you are loyal to one side or another, you're no longer standing on principle. You're just kneeling at a different altar. And that altar is most definitely not an altar made for the worship of Jesus Christ. Well, thank you again for being with us here on this episode of Culture Crossroads Daily Dose. Reminder, you can find our full show every Sunday, 5 p.m. Central Time on BeckTV.plus. That is BEKTV.plus. And thank you for watching as well. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that good stuff, especially liking, commenting, and subscribing to the show. What do you think? Is this President Trump comment, just a bunch of a much ado about nothing, as they say. Is it worthy or unworthy of the moment? Is this a keen global strategic move? Or are some of the critics maybe on the right of the aisle, maybe they have a point in that this could have been handled a lot better? I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comments below. As always, keep it as civil as you can, and thank you for watching.